All right, welcome everyone. I am so excited to have you here for today's explainer. We're going on a sweeping, chronological journey exploring the literal evolution of human expression. You know, theater, dance, music, these aren't just Friday night entertainment. They're a mirror of our history. They reflect who we were, who we are, and exactly how we connect with one another. So let's just dive right into this fascinating story, stretching all the way from primal rituals to the absolute blinding lights of Broadway.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the origins of performance, move straight into the theater of classical antiquity, explore India's ancient stage rules, hit the Renaissance revival, and finally arrive at the modern musical era.
Starting things off with Section 1, Origins of Performance.
Let's think about a really fundamental question. Why do we perform? Seriously, why? If we look back, there's actual evidence of dance dating all the way back to the Paleolithic period, captured forever in rock paintings. Long before stages, before scripts even existed, performance was just deeply rooted in human survival and our relationship with nature.
You see, early societies didn't view dance as some separate art form to just casually watch. No, they used it to actually try and influence the unpredictable forces around them. Our ancestors danced to ask for rain, for a good harvest, and even for fertility. And there's a really fascinating modern example of this survival instinct too. The Yanomamo people in South America actually still perform the amo amo. It's this ritual of song and dance done right before a hunt, just to ensure good luck in capturing food.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that, as historians point out, early people used dance as a means of communication and as a way of life. By mimicking nearby animals or the crazy, wild forces of Mother Nature, performance was literally an essential survival language for early humanity.
Moving forward to Section 2, Theater of Classical Antiquity.
The sheer scale of early Greek theater is just staggering. Over in Athens, performance evolved into a civic duty, tightly tied to festivals honoring the god Dionysus. Picture this: audiences of 10 to 20,000 people packing into these massive, semicircular auditoria cut straight into the hillsides. And remember, no microphones back then. They relied entirely on brilliant acoustics, like so good you could drop a pin and hear it in the back row. All of this paired with male actors wearing these large, exaggerated character masks. This is exactly where we get the foundational genres we still use today, tragedy, comedy, and those slightly more chaotic satyr plays.
Now, when the Romans took over around 300 BCE, they borrowed heavily from the Greeks, but they drastically shifted the whole purpose. While Greek theater was deeply rooted in religious duty and philosophical exploration, Roman theater, well, it became almost purely about the popcorn entertainment. They built these grander, enclosed structures packed with elaborate stage machinery, and they filled them with broad comedies, pantomimes, and yes, even brutal gladiatorial spectacles.
All right, on to Section 3, India's ancient stage rules.
Meanwhile, thousands of miles to the east, an entirely different but equally complex foundation for performance was being built. Enter the Natya Shastra. Often called the Fifth Veda, it was composed by Bharata Muni somewhere between 200 BCE and 200 CE. And wow, this was a monumental manual. We're talking 36 chapters and 6,000 verses, comprehensively codifying absolutely everything about Indian classical performance. I mean everything, from the acting and music to the literal geometry of the stage itself.
Right at the heart of the Natya Shastra is this really beautiful philosophical duality. It balances Shastra, which are the rigid mathematical rules of rhythm and scale, with praxis, the living artistic application. To put it beautifully, theory is the body, but praxis is the breath. So the rules provide the skeleton, sure, but it's the performer who literally breathes life into it.
So, what was the ultimate goal of all these incredibly precise rules? It was to achieve rasa. This theory dictated that a performance must perfectly evoke a specific aesthetic flavor in the audience. There were 8 original rasas: love, humor, pathos, anger, heroism, terror, disgust, and wonder. Literally every single gesture or breath an actor took was calibrated to inject these exact emotions straight into the viewer. Talk about precision.
Bridging the gap back in the West, things took a pretty dark turn. After the height of those Roman spectacles, Europe entered the Middle Ages, and formal theater sharply declined. The rising Christian church viewed the physical celebration of dance with deep suspicion, eventually banning it as a pagan activity. Later, when the bubonic plague ravaged the population, a traumatized society developed an obsession with death.
They actually connected it to witchcraft in what became known as the Danse Macabre, or the Dance of Death. It wasn't until the 1500s that professional theater was truly reborn.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Renaissance Revival.
During the Renaissance, massive playhouses finally returned to Europe, bringing two absolute powerhouses with them. In England, you had William Shakespeare at the Globe Theatre. He was writing these timeless explorations of universal human themes, power, revenge, and fate. Meanwhile, over in France, Molière was completely revolutionizing comedy. He ingeniously combined the raucous clowns of Italian commedia dell'arte with neoclassical French satire to create some of the most influential comedic works in history, a real game changer.
And finally, Section 5, the modern musical era. Now, modern Western musical theater didn't just magically appear out of nowhere, right? It was a steady, structural evolution. It really kicked off in the 19th century with the light opera works of creators like Gilbert and Sullivan. Then, between 1915 and 1918, the Princess Theater musicals took a major artistic leap forward. They moved beyond those frothy reviews and started to integrate actual, cohesive plots, and that set the perfect stage for the massive blockbusters of the 1940s.
But the true turning point was Rodgers and Hammerstein's 1943 masterpiece, Oklahoma. They tightly integrated a plot where the songs and dances actually developed the characters. The impact was instant. Just listen to what New York Times critic Brooks Atkinson wrote. After a verse like that, sung to a buoyant melody, the banalities of the old musical stage became intolerable. It was literally a total revolution for the art form.
And to really understand the sheer scale of that revolution, you only need one number: 2,212. That is the number of performances Oklahoma ran for on Broadway. Just incredible. It became the very first modern blockbuster, setting off a massive box office frenzy, winning a Pulitzer Prize, and establishing a milestone that historians actually use to categorize entire eras of theater.
Now, these Golden Age musicals also served as a mirror for society. The formula for these huge hits deeply reflected widely held post-war perceptions of the American dream. The narratives heavily pushed themes of stability, like Protestant marriage ideals, the moral safety of suburban homes, traditional gender roles positioning women as homemakers, and a uniquely American independent pioneering spirit. Essentially, the stage was reflecting exactly what the audience aspired to be.
Of course, theater never stops evolving. Building on the Golden Age, the late 20th and early 21st centuries gave rise to the mega musical. Shows like Les Miserables, Rent, Wicked, and Hamilton turned musical theater into a massive, highly collaborative global industry. But recently, this industry faced its greatest challenge ever. The COVID-19 pandemic abruptly shut down live stages worldwide. However, this sparked a massive shift toward digital access, streaming, and filmed live performances. It really proved that our fundamental need to connect through performance will always find a way to reach an audience. So, we've traced the heartbeat of performance from ancient humans dancing for rain, through the amphitheaters of Greece and the rigorous rules of India, all the way to the billion-dollar digital spectacles of today. It really shows us that while technologies change, the human need to tell stories is completely universal. So I want to leave you with this final thought. As performance leaps into the future, will we see a total shift toward immersive storytelling? How will the development of autonomous virtual actors and AI completely transform live performance? What will our stories look like tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.